And we're here with Robbie Stahl. He's the founder of The Fitness Doctor and also the creator of the Biomechanical optimization system. Robbie, welcome to the Optimal Performance Podcast.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean. Pleasure to be here, brother.
So one question that I like to ask all of the people in fitness and nutrition and performance is the same question. So I'm going to come out with it. What time is it where you are, and what have you put into your body today?
That's a great question. So it is, let me check so you can see how busy I've been today. I actually have to look at the clock, right? When you're not that busy, you don't have to look at the clock. And when you're really busy, you have to look at the clock. So it is 2:42 p.m. here in beautiful, sunny Arizona. And the things I've put into my body today are a large bowl of organic fruits of mixed variety, a Greek yogurt, which was also mixed berry. Fruits I chose today were raspberry, blueberry, grapes, plum, and orange, nectarine, and the Greek yogurt, and then 6 eggs. So six whole eggs, also organic, cage-free, flax-fed eggs. So
Nice.
flax-fed chickens that then produce the egg. So next I had, let's see here. I like to do a morning to lunch snack, right? Because it's good to really fuel your body early on and really drive the nutrients and even calories in earlier, I believe. And so then I had a beef protein. I stopped using whey protein a while back. It's not that I'm totally against it. It's not that I never consume it, but most people do, including myself, have some level of milk allergy and have some inflammatory response from milk, and it's not just the lactose. So just taking lactase, which is a great idea, doesn't solve it. So I take a beef protein. I put a little bit of organic honey in there. I had a banana, and then I had a bar, which is like a peanut butter chocolate bar. It's not a chocolate bar like candy. It's made with like egg whites and all this natural stuff. And then I had lunch, and lunch was about 6 ounces of chicken, some mixed vegetable poppers, a salad, and that was it. So that's been it so far.
Any supplements or nootropics or vitamins or anything?
Yeah, I take, so I believe in taking a low dose multivitamin mineral. It's not that the product is a low dose, it's that typically we don't need as much multivitamin mineral as the supplement manufacturer would like to shove down our throat, so we keep buying a lot of it. Usually just multivitamin mineral, I believe, my personal opinion and proof that from science I've read is you really need a kind of a insurance policy with vitamins and minerals. So I break the multivitamin mineral in half, and I take that once to twice a day, depending on how intense I'm training. And I use a glucosamine chondroitin supplement. I am 41 years old now, so around that age, I want to start really working on taking care of those joints. I do take a vitamin D as soon as I wake up, and I use a testosterone cream at around 7 a.m., which mimics my own natural circadian rhythm of testosterone production. And their highest peak of testosterone around 7 a.m. So there's 10 different ways that you can take testosterone, and having a lot of experience with that over many years and working with many clients who also have different forms of hormone supplementation, I believe strongly that it's best to mimic our natural pattern. So I use a testosterone cream at around 7 a.m., only a therapeutic dosage. I'm not into like roiding up or anything crazy like that. So that's not the way I roll, but I do believe like, hey man, if your testosterone is low, you are better off. From some of the best researchers who have talked to in person, the best research on testosterone basically vehemently agree that if you are low in testosterone, it is better to get to an optimal level than just to like keep trying to use natural stuff, which sometimes doesn't work. So, and yeah, about a half gallon of water so far today, and that would sum it up.
Nice. Good deal. I love that question because, when you talk to nutrition experts, authors, doctors, it's nice to see who's putting their money where their mouth is, who's actually abiding by the things that they talk about. Occasionally, you talk to somebody who you believe who is a fitness expert or nutrition expert, And, you know, if they talk about starting the day with a bowl of cereal, it's like, oh, okay. All right. Okay. You know, a bunch of soy milk and stuff like that. So, well, that's awesome. Well, that's a great start. So, you know, Robbie, I know that you've done a ton of things and you've really grown your service. And I know it to be really unique. And so I definitely want to get into the nuts and bolts of how your system works. But your specialty, your specialization now is really sort of like virtual, like remote training, like helping people get their body back when they can't come into the gym or can't come into a clinic or see somebody like yourself in person. So I guess just give us sort of like a sort of encapsulation without getting too much into the detail, because I want to unpack that a little bit as to what it is that you actually do for people. What service do you provide as the fitness doctor?
What we do at the Fitness Doctor is we help you exercise in such a way that's ideally aligned with the way your creator made you. And what that means is, just like, you know, listening to this show, you can have artificial food and you can have artificial lots of things. You know, listening to Sean's show, you probably know, like, having a bunch of electricity right by your bedside and all these kind of things are bad. It creates an artificial environment. Having too much light at 10 p.m. is bad for you. Also, exercise works the same way. People exercise in such a way that it's kind of artificial. The stuff that Frank Zane and Arnold Schwarzenegger made up to look freaky in the mirror is not the most functional, is not in line with the way your body is supposed to function. Neither is much of the other exercise stuff that marketers are trying to jam down your throat. And so what is optimal is taking ideally how the body should function and then exercising based on that function and then getting all the kind of results, fat loss, muscle, all this kind from that. So function ideally in line with your body. And we can get deeper into that.
Yeah. And one of the sort of hallmarks of this podcast is the understanding that each of us needs something different. And each of us needs something different based on the different phases of our lives. And from day to day, based on the level of stress that we're experiencing or inflammation, how much sleep we're getting. And so I'm excited to dig into this with you, because I think what you've created is something that it's truly unique, and it's not anything that I've ever heard before. But at the fundamental level, the fact is you're doing something that is specific to each person. It's not, hey, you know, go do this program, go do this video. It's going to work for you no matter what. So I'm excited to dig in some of the details. Let's dig into, because I know this is impressive and new. Explain to us how the biomechanical optimization system works.
Sure. So let's make it very specific to you, the listener. But before we get to that, let me just spend 30 seconds on this. And that is the way our process works is we do a head-to-toe biomechanical analysis of every client. So we're looking at what your deficiencies are first, because we're all walking around and lifting and whatever we're doing in terms of our chosen physical activity. We all have some level of deficiency. That could mean simple things like your hamstrings are too tight. So it pulls on the back of your pelvis, which then misaligns your back, which then puts your back at risk of protruding discs and all of these other types of things. When you go and work out, you're more likely to have damage to your body. Big thing that happens with athletes. Their knee kind of falls towards the inside. This is the number one reason for athletes to have ACL tears. Their knee moves towards the inside. And so this is a deficiency that then causes ACL tears or degeneration in people who aren't athletes, because they're not doing explosive enough movement to cause an immediate thing like an ACL tear, but their knee does degenerate over time. So those are some of the examples of what a mechanical deficiency are. And there's many, there's hundreds of them, okay? And so what we do is there's actually 180 of them that we've specifically identified. And what we do is we look for which one of those mechanical deficiencies you have before you start an exercise system with us. So instead of just going to a trainer and be like, yeah, you should do squats because squats are the best thing and like they're really going to build your leg and if you're a girl, you need to isolate your butt muscles. And, if you're a guy, you want to really build the shoulders. So kind of forcing into that. What we do is we say, well, how is your body mechanically functioning? What is it missing? And basically what we do is we're psychic. We literally become psychic, because the reason why I say that is we figure out how you're going to get injured before you ever get injured. Or we figure out that little plaguing thing that keeps nagging you in your neck, your back, your shoulder, whatever. We figure out what that is before it happens, and we figure out before it becomes worse, and also we figure that out for you so that it stops being that way. So that's the evaluation. Now, if we get into like, well, what is biomechanical optimization? What does the exercise system consist of? I think one of the best examples, because here's the difficult part, and we could spend like the next rest of the week on this podcast going through, but I think I might bore some people with the science. So let's make this as fun and interesting, as connecting as possible, and I'll give you a couple amazing examples here, like, oh, I got it, right? So here's the thing. Here's a perfect example of biomechanical optimization. Your upper body is designed in such a way that your shoulder blade or scapula is the only bone in the body that doesn't connect to another bone. It's the only bone in your body that doesn't connect bone to bone. And so it connects bone to soft tissue, right? If you look at the shoulder blade of any human, they're floating in kind of the back area. Well, if the tissues that connect to that draw the scapula back and down are not very strong, and strong compared to the tissue like the chest and front side of the shoulder, then what will happen is that bone will become completely displaced, and then that displacement of that bone will cause shoulder damage, which is the reason why 50% of men over the age of 50 have a torn rotator cuff. And regardless of your age or health, the most easily injured joint in the body is the shoulder, because it has huge ranges of motion, and it's the only bone in the body that doesn't connect bone to bone. And so what should you be taking from that? Well, if your bone connects to a bone, there's two solid surfaces connecting. Well, in this case, the bone connects to soft surfaces that are like motors. Your muscles are like motors inside. And if you don't have good motor control of that shoulder blade or scapula, it leads you to a lot of shoulder dysfunction. So what we do, instead of going like, yeah, you want to get your chest bigger and like, oh, it's all about bench press and like the way you look, we're like, well, how specifically is your scapula aligned in your body, and what muscles that attach to that, how are they firing? Do they have optimal strength? Do they have optimal ability? So we optimize that, and then we build all the other muscles that want to make you look like you should be on a magazine cover. We build it around that. So we're approaching it from the functional standpoint first.
Yeah, that's obviously important, right? Because when you perform at even a decent level, even if you're not a particularly active person, and you're getting into, a better physique, you want to become stronger and healthier, so you can live longer and have a happier life, and pick up your groceries out of the trunk, and grab a can of soup or something out of the cupboards, talking really practically, is if you have deficiencies in your body is naturally going to compensate somewhere else to make good on that. So if you have something going wrong in your top left shoulder, then there's probably something else that's compensating for it on the right side to even that out. My question is how is it that you're able to do that sort of analysis for people remotely, like without them being in front of you and seeing how their posture is and seeing how they stand, look, walk? Like, walk me through that sort of intake process for really sort of diagnosing what people are dealing with.
Sure. The way we're able to do that virtually is first, having done that for many years, not virtually, in person, and all of our experts having a really solid idea of how humans should be moving, so they have a trained eye. So really, it's our trained eye and level of knowledge of our experts that helps us do that. And that's really the number. But how do we how specifically do we do that? So what we do, let's again talk about the upper body. So in terms of the upper body, we're doing different motion and strength tests. So they're at home typically, and they would have something as simple as a band attached to a doorway. Okay, and now there's all these fasteners that you can attach, like a fastener to a door, and then you attach an elastic band to that, and now you have resistance training at home for like different pulling exercises, right? Which is typically the thing that's missed at home is things like rows and pull downs. So what we do is we isolate scapular motion, for example, and see, are you able to, after we show you what to do virtually in a virtual setting, right? We're in our gym and the client's typically at home. How are they able to control? How well do they control the scapula where we want them to control that scapula to? And depending on where their scapular shoulder blade goes to, it's telling us that different muscles are stronger than other muscles. And the other thing we do is we have 11 different mobility tests, and we can literally on the screen use a goniometric, in other words, like angle, instead of using a technical word, angle measurements of how far they're able to bring their right ear to the right shoulder and their left ear to their left shoulder. And we can see if they're compensating or they're turning their body. We can see that they're compensating. We look at that with all the hip motions and back motions and shoulder motions, and we put them in different positions through verbal coaching on the meeting. And then we're able to analyze that through analysis tools we have digitally on our side and measure all these joint angles and everything. And then what we have is a software that's totally proprietary to our business, and we enter the data, and then we have an algorithm that automatically computes and tell us where the common deficiencies are in our client. And then we use those deficiencies to then use solutions for fixing the deficiencies. And that's the way their exercise gets customized.
Yeah, I like that approach. It's a first things first, right? You know, again, we've all in this podcast, I've had guests that absolutely bash personal trainers, like crush them, like it's dangerous. They're not qualified. They're not engaged with you. They don't really care whether or not you get more fit or not. In fact, they're better off if you spend most of your training sessions talking about The Masked Singer rather than actually working out, because then they're going to have to do more working out. And the results are terrible. So we've covered this sort of progression, especially with Dr. John Jaquish, who's the creator of the X3 system. He just skewers personal trainers, and he wrote a book talking about just how most people in the personal training industry just don't know what they're doing, and it's dangerous for people. So to hear your process, which is, hey, slow down. First things first, where are you lacking? Before we build, before we grow, before we increase mobility, let's figure out what's going on. And it makes sense to me. If someone is not able to go into their gym, if someone's not able to they don't have the right equipment at their house, they don't really know where to start. They know that they want to get more fit and improve their physique and their mobility, but they don't have a specialist. Well, talking to you and your team and like watching on video saying, oh, okay, well, you can tell, really talented people, I'm sure, who are working with you are like, okay, I can see that the angle here is off, and what that's doing is it's pinching this and it's doing this. I just think that's great, because that is something that is really needed now for people, especially since so many of us are sitting so long every single day. Tell me a little bit about how you transitioned from the previous iteration of this business, which I assume, as you mentioned, like included in person, to a virtual platform. Was it COVID and you're like, okay, now it's really time to make this thing happen? Or was it in your mind you were going to be switching to a sort of a virtual training system? Walk me through that process.
The big thing that actually took us from that to figure this out is our clients typically are, we've worked with all ages. We have professional athletes, we have Olympic level athletes, we have professional fighters, we have professional hockey players, we have super elite human beings. But our number one, in terms of majority client, are people over the age of 50, average Jane and Joe clients who oftentimes are financially successful to be able to afford what we do, which now we also have other more economical options, but our clients are typically financially successful, over the age of 50, already physically active at some degree, even if they're doing a walking program. And so how many of those people are within a 10-mile square radius of our gym? Not that many. And so who wants to drive 30 minutes or more to go to a gym 3-4 days a week to work with your expert? Yeah, they do it. Yeah, we've had many clients, but it's very different. So that presents a problem in business. And so what we do is so unique, and then our population is so unique that it presents an issue. So we wanted to, for many years, move into a virtual setting and do what we do. And so once COVID hit, we're like, we're out, sold out of all of our gym position, and completely immediately moved out of the gym. Was like, oh, that's exactly what we needed to move forward. So it's something that we were working on and headed towards. But once COVID hit, it took us completely towards the virtual setting. And so now what happens is now we can serve the entire English speaking and Portuguese speaking, by the way, world, because we have both. We have some Brazilian team members as well. So we serve the whole English and Brazilian speaking world now with what we do. And what we've done is now we have all of these more economical offshoots for different categories. So like for our youth athletes, we have agility programs, and we have muscle gain programs. We're even coming up with some very unique, interesting, very fun stuff for single guys to train with extremely hot, beautiful Brazilian trainers and physical therapists through our Brazilian model, which is totally unique. That's a whole other story. But like we're looking to add more fun and stuff, because the thing about training with the trainer online, in addition to all this science stuff that we're talking about here, is it needs to be fun. Yeah. So like, and by the way, your past guest expert that has the training system, I agree. Most trainers, the thing is, to become a trainer, you actually don't even need to be certified. There's no legal requirement to have any kind of background or education. And all of our experts are either master's or doctorate level professionals. But the training industry is full of people who got a certification over a weekend, and they're pushing people through extreme mechanical stress on their body. So yeah, it is super, super, most fitness training is super dangerous. And that's the reason why 87% of people who exercise get injured exercising, because regardless of if they're with the trainer or not, because oftentimes the trainer helps them get injured because they push them so far. So yeah, I completely, we're really also kind of the anti-personal trainer, personal trainers, you know? Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. But
well, tell me a little bit about your background, because for those of you watching on YouTube, they can see your physique. They can see that you look like a UFC fighter. You've got the shoulders for it, you got the chest for it, you got the buzz cut. You know, you obviously wrestled for a while or did some combat sports. So maybe, I don't know, maybe there's a connection between the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and so forth. But I'm really curious, like what's your expert level, and how did you first, like, were you a personal trainer for a long time before you developed these unique approaches to performance?
That is an awesome question. And yeah, and I've done my share of the wrong way, as we all have. You know, look, if you're listening to this podcast, no matter what you're an expert in, go back 10 years, 20 years, however time you have to go back, and please tell me if you were doing things perfectly in the beginning. So let me raise my hand and say, hi, I'm Robbie Stahl, and in the beginning of my training career, I did things wrong. So yeah, so let's start there, and then let's add to that, when did I start? So my beginning in fitness was actually at the age of 8 years old. I had this very strong plastic box of tools for kids to build different stuff with. I took all that stuff out, went and got river rocks in the backyard, put it into that box, and would start figuring out all these different ways to lift this thing. Right? So that's really where it started. I fast forward, I read my first college level exercise science textbook at 12 years old. I went to school. I would constantly study in the library, even though I was not the best student, and I would fail some classes throughout high school. I failed a couple. I would be in the library studying. Like, who's in the library studying but failing a class as a teenager? And that was me, because I'm studying physiology and endocrinology and biomechanics. This is just always a huge passion. went to school to be a physical therapist, got out, decided that, I really what I wanted to focus on was fitness. My first huge technical involvement in fitness was actually producing stage bodybuilders, both men and women. And so I became an elite expert at, okay, you want to look, today's April 6th, and you want to look perfect on June 10th. Well, I became a super elite expert at that. And in the process of forcing people's bodies to look like a magazine cover on X date, that's really where I learned all the things that we do wrong in exercise, because that's the ideal result that everyone wants. But let me tell you that there's a lot of damage that comes with that. And so I learned what all that damage was, and seeing other elite trainers in that space doing to people. And so, yeah, it became amazing. I used to love to take people who have like zero muscle, zero physique whatsoever, or excess body fat, and turn them into a physical specimen in X amount of time. And I love that because of seeing the transformation. And that's really where this whole biomechanical optimization thing came from, because what happened was I'm like, okay, not only my clients, but every other trainer in the gym's clients, the more fit they get, the more different types of injuries and such and breakdown they get. Like, there has to be a better way. This isn't fitness. This is, well, plus people, when they're that focused in themselves and their body, other things happen like divorce and that type of stuff because they're so self-absorbed. So it's a really crappy place to actually be, to focus on your body in that level. So I got a huge life lesson, and I hope to share that life lesson with everyone else listening, because that's not what fitness is about. Fitness is about taking care of your temple, you feeling absolutely amazing because of the physical function you have, and then being able to help and spread that to others, and being the best individual you can be, so you can bring that energy and share the greatness you have inside of you through whatever it is that you're best at or you care about the most, whether it's art or cars or mechanics or fitness or accounting. It doesn't matter. Like, but for you to be the best, you need to also be physically the best, which then also helps you be mentally the best. And it became that, and the reason why I became so strongly sold on, and why I've spent like 15,000 hours developing the system we have, is because I saw what the other way does, and the masses are doing the other way. So I would strongly invite people to learn a better, more self and life and universal optimizing way of being fit and taking care of yourself.
What's the most common what's an exercise myth that most people are doing that they don't know isn't working for them? Like, what's another way to ask that? What sort of like sort of generally understood principles of fitness are people screwing themselves over with?
Yeah, great question. Excellent question.
Thank you.
Let's talk about two big ones. And then if we can explore more if you want to dive into others. But two big ones. Women do this also, but especially guys. When guys start thinking, I'm going to get fit, what do? What's some of the things?
Lift heavy.
Yeah, or they do push-ups. Yes,
Sure.
both.
Yeah.
Saying lifting heavy is a whole other story also. But one of the big things they do is push-ups, right? How guys get injured from wanting to just do push-ups so often, because especially like time of COVID, they don't have a gym. So like when you're at your house, like I was referring to earlier about bands and the attachment to the doorway and all that stuff. Well, when you do just push-ups, you're strengthening. Remember we talked about scap? You're strengthening the front side of your muscles. You're making your upper body totally imbalanced. You can see your chest in the mirror. So you become interested in your chest because you're thinking about improving the way you look, right? But it's not about look. It's about function. And remember, form follows function. So if you make yourself awesome functionally, you will also look awesome. So if you first go right? So the big myth, doing push-ups, like push-ups needs to be a mainstay of my program. I can do 50 or 75 or whatever, or I want to do 50 or 70. Look, just give up on that idea and start doing rows and pull downs and strengthening your back muscles. Because your back, your lower and upper, but in this case we're talking about upper back, your upper back, which means primarily rows and pull downs and pulling type of exercises, are much more important than pushing exercises such as push-ups.
Awesome. Oh, that's really great. Well, and also too, I mean, how many of us spend a long period of each day lurched over with our head down, looking at a screen, looking at the phone, looking at a laptop, looking at the television. Like there's this like folding forward. You know, people talk about tech neck because their neck is just going down, looking at their tech all the time. It totally makes sense. Like you can't see your back, but buddy, it's you're it's not working back there, bro. You're totally lopsided. I think that's great. Okay, what else?
So another big one is squats, right? So anybody who's like really wants to get into lifting, they think like, oh, I'm going to do a squat. And usually they think I'm going to do a barbell squat. So a lot of these like trendy fitness centers have helped get away from that. That's one good thing that they've helped do, because there's usually not a squat rack at a place like Orange Theory. They don't have a squat rack. This is not where they're set up. But most gyms, of course, have a squat rack. It's not that squats are bad for you, and it's not that barbell squats are bad for you, but it is that the way you're doing, and most people, not you, Sean, but listeners and the mass of humans, okay, are doing squats is not correct. And even if you knew how to do correct, your body is probably not set up to handle that load. Mm-hmm. Let me explain. One of the big problems of doing a back squat, putting a barbell on your back and then using it for added load for a squat, is actually the shoulders. So most people don't have much more than 90 degrees of external rotation of their shoulder. So their ability to rotate their arm backwards, right? And how far do you have to rotate your arm backwards to hold on to a barbell with both arms behind your head? And so what happens is the humeral head, or simply the top of your arm bone, I'm going to use really simple terms, the top of your arm bone starts jutting out of the joint, and it causes tears around the tissue that encase your shoulder joint. And this is called a slap tear. And this is a common tear that people have in their shoulders because of doing these types of exercises, trying to put a bar. And then if you don't have that much range of motion to hold a barbell behind your back, it's changing the alignment of your back and forcing your spine into misalignment. So you have load on your back, forcing yourself into misalignment, and then doing an exercise going to high fatigue, which then causes you to make other mechanical misalignments, which then cause damage in other parts of your body. So like a back squat is basically a shit show. That's okay to say in your show.
You're good.
So a back squat is basically a shit show for most people, unless you're just kind of a biomechanically optimized specimen, which most people are not. So
when somebody comes to you and I'm just trying to wrap my brain around this process a little bit more, is like when you are doing the intake and you're saying, okay, what sort of exercises are you doing now? And you meet somebody and they're like, well, I'm doing 1,000 push-ups a day. I'm doing, I go to the gym and I do, 3 sets of 30 back squats. And you're saying, okay, you're getting a picture of their activity and how they work out. And then you have them do that sort of, that rotational test. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see like this, the hand going up and behind you. Then are you able to sort of like get a picture like, oh, well, I see that you're creating this sort of slap tear happening in your shoulder. And then that begins the process of even more discovery for what they're doing wrong and how that's affecting their posture and their physique. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And then, we do our mechanical analysis, and then we'll be like, oh, well, you only have 89 degrees of external rotation on your right side, and you need to have 97 to do a back squat and not have a shoulder issue. So you have, you're 8 degrees deficient of where you need to be. So all of that is going to be made up at your shoulder joint. And I see you're doing a bunch of back. That's the way we look at it.
Yeah.
where are you at mechanically, and then what kind of exercise you're doing. Oh, you have these deficiencies, so that means the exercise you're doing is causing this type of damage.
Yeah. Okay. So let's keep going. Tell us a few more things that people are screwing up. Is like repetitive motion a problem if you're like a super runner, super cyclist? I just sort of throwing that in there because I know that's especially for listeners of this podcast who are type A folks. They're typically pretty active. Is what other sort of things are people screwing up, and also is repetitive motion a big deal for people?
Yeah, repetitive motion is a huge deal for people. And the best way, the huge breakthrough that you're going to have right now for understanding how much load and volume and exercise exposure you should put on your body is realize that from head to toe, your body does not have the same amount of adaptation. And so what I mean by that is, like, let's say you're a person who's used to doing a ton of abs, like a bunch of crunches, and you're just great at it. And you do sit-ups and you do all kinds of stuff. So your abs are really strong, right? But your calves, you don't do that much running and you don't do that much hiking. So your calves just aren't used to, and your whole lower backside of your lower leg is not used to doing that much activity. So if you go out and you try to, like, oh, your friends invite you to do some activity over the weekend, right? And you're trying to keep up with those who are doing a bunch of activity that requires that part of the body, and you blow out your Achilles tendon. Well, or you have a calf strain, a much lesser issue, muscle strain, like you tear your calf, which is not good either. Well, why? Is because you're trying to do like way more than you should do, or you get shin splints all of a sudden, which is an imbalance between the muscle on the back side of your lower leg and the front side. And so that is an issue. So really what I'm getting at, specifically the specific takeaway and simple takeaway, is realize that each part of your body is only used to doing X amount of activity. So think about what is that X amount of activity for you. If you run, then your legs are used to running. How much do you run? Well, I run 3 miles a week. Okay, then your legs are used to running 3 miles a week. How much do you run at a time? Oh, I run 1 mile at a time, 3 days a week. Okay, so your legs and your body's used to running 1 mile at a time, 3 days a week. So if you put all 3 miles in one day, how much more overload is that? Mm-hmm. That's an extra 200% overload. Mm-hmm. And so here's the takeaway: is what the solution is you should only overload your body 10% per week, right? So if you're used to running 1 mile at a time, then what do you do next week if you want to increase?
1.1.
Exactly. And if you put all 3 miles on one day, that's a totally different overload. And so what most people don't realize is, like, think about that for your lower back, right? Lower back pain, 80% of people have lower back pain. So this applies to many, many, many people. So, okay, lower back pain. If you have lower back pain, how much load and stress is your lower back used to doing? And let's say it's not much at all. You just start an exercise program, or maybe you've been exercising for a while, but you don't do a ton of lower back strengthening stuff. Well, if you go out and try to, like, hit that new program that you just bought, you might end up in excess of 500, 600, 800% more overload on your lower back. So it's absolutely killing you. There's a reason for that. And so now we have to think about, and this is the huge breakthrough, only overload 10% of the time. But here's the problem, Sean, is that most people, they have biomechanical deficits. So now your body's misaligned and you're doing excess overload. So now we're going to multiply. Now we're going to multiply, because you have to multiply the misalignment stress times the overload stress. So now you can be in excess of 1,000% excess stress when you're only supposed to be 10%. So, that's really the overuse injuries happen, number one, because of misalignments, and then number two, because of actual overuse. It's usually misalignment first and then actual overuse second.
We either you've been there before, or you know somebody that has decided, hey, all right, I'm going to get in shape. We're here in the beginning of April for all the people that started that had New Year's resolutions. You say, okay, I'm going to get fit now. I'm going to start. And then you say, cool, I'm going to push it really hard. I'm going to go from fairly complacent, sitting a lot, not eating very good, but I'm going to really get out there and I'm going to get after it. And then I'm going to push myself too hard. And then you get injured. And then that injury not only sets you back, but then it makes it even harder for you to recover to get back to the baseline that you were at. I mean, how frequently does that happen for you and your clients?
Oh, basically never. We don't really have.
No, I mean people that come to you. Like how often do you hear that story?
Yeah, well, everyone.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking, right?
Yeah, basically everyone. Everyone. So, here's the thing. Like, I'm a type A personality-driven entrepreneur as well, and so like we're all prone to doing stupid stuff. So I never hurt myself working out, but like I've hurt myself in sport because I'm doing aggressive stuff like submission wrestling and MMA fighting and jiu-jitsu. So like, I've for example, I'm dealing with a recent surgery right now. It's funny because we spent the last however long talking about all this stuff, and no, I didn't get hurt doing a back squat or anything whatsoever in the gym, but I did tear my chest muscle off of my arm bone by fighting with a 300-pound opponent, right? And so there's no biomechanical optimization or preparation in the world that's going to prepare me for having my arm outstretched and a guy rolling over my arm.
Right.
But the cool part is now there's things I can do to now overcome that and deal with my injury and move forward optimally. And the same thing I'm teaching here is the same thing I'm going to do. I'm going to do 10% overload, starting from a very remedial level of just mobility into strength exercises. And in 6 months from now, which is how long the rehab is, I'll be amazing again on that part of my body. But yeah, everybody deals. But here's the sad part is most people do not maybe that extreme of an injury, but they injure themselves and they cause damage to their body in their exercise. And your exercise is not a competition. It's not a sport. And when we turn exercise into a competition, then things that happen in sport happen from your exercise. So I'll leave certain companies out in certain methods of training because I really don't like to bash people because it's not about what someone created. It's just about what we're doing mechanically to the body. But, if you turn your exercise into a sport and make it a competition, you are asking for huge levels of risk, the type of thing you see in the NFL from impact injuries, because you are doing an impactful type of exercise, the same as the NFL is. So if that's the kind of thing you'd like to expose you to, then just know what you're getting into. But if that's not what you want to do, then don't choose that path of exercise. Think mechanically optimized first, and then build yourself from there. And by the way, so all these systems that we're talking about now, we're building many economical platforms to cater to a large population, and you can find that at thefitnessdoctor.com. So thefitnessdoctor.com, you can find all that stuff there. You can also, I'm going to invite any of your listeners, if you want to just reach out to me personally, you have something that's plaguing you or you want to improve, you can text me. I'll give you my actual cell phone number, and that's 602-434-4248, 602-434-4248. And the thing is we're all in different places and we all need different things. And that's what makes some of this stuff so complicated and difficult is what are you going through personally and what do you want to achieve and where have you come from? And it just depends on every person. But the right way to do it is the intelligent approach. Don't make exercise a competition. And the way to get there is to take care of your body first, and then the performance and the looks and all that stuff will come.
Yeah, well said. Well, he just gave you his cell phone number, so if you're curious about getting better, you got something that's bothering you, and you want to make some changes, some improvements, text Robbie. He just gave it to you. Yeah. Bold move.
Yeah, right.
On the video, the video that lives on your homepage, you talk about 10x results, and walk us through how. Explain to us the math how people can get 10x results, because I think that is a pretty like chin dropping figure to say like, okay, I've been working out, I've seen some improvements. How are you going to go from a little bit of improvement to 10x it? Like how does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the way you 10x your body results is instead of just going after muscle gain or fat loss or this type of thing, is you start mechanically optimizing your body as well. So you can improve your ankle mobility. Maybe your ankle mobility is deficient. So now because your ankle mobility improves, you can improve, 4, 5, 6, 7 extra degrees of ankle mobility, whereas before that was causing mechanical problem in your lower body. Maybe it's causing knee pain, foot pain, ankle pain. And instead of being like developing a bunion, so instead of having negative results, now you're going to create positive results because your foot can move the way it's intended to move. So we went from causing a negative result to an ideally optimal result, which then we can then build performance and strength and appearance and all those things. So almost everybody is going to be faced with, mechanical damage of their body at some point. And so if we can remove the mechanical damage completely from the equation and we can turn that into a positive result, and we start going head to toe and thinking about, optimizing here, not a damage, only positive result, not a damage, only positive result. So that means all of those days of your life, you remove the negative result, you feel optimally amazing, you feel better, you function better, you're able to get so much more results, and you don't experience that negative result. That for me is 10x results. So without giving you boring details and actual math to like, how do we figure out 10x, which I could do, but I don't think that's as interesting. So you literally can get 10x results, and that's how, is because exercise comes with negative results, and no one talks about that. Let me give you another awesome example, Sean. So what most people don't realize, because you asked about running and overuse, here's an amazing kind of breakthrough thought, okay? Factual thought. They did a study on 46,000 people over 20 years, okay, on running, specifically running. And what they found is that up to about 20 miles of running per week, right? Not at one time, up per week. What will happen is you'll get decreased morbidity. So decrease of things that cause your body to feel breakdown or dysfunction and cause disease states. You're going to get an improvement. But around 20 miles and thereafter, what we see is a decline and a detriment to people's health. So there's a point, more exercise is not always good, and there is an optimal level for different people. And we could even get into that, like how do you know what your optimal level is? But beyond the mechanical stuff, how much exercise should you do? Under 20 miles of running per week, you can build awesome positive results. Around 20 and beyond, you start creating detriment to your health. Such thing as atrial fibrillation. That's a big one that shows up. So causing AFib, so irregular heartbeat from running too much, right? And so that's huge. And so if you're not at 20 miles a week right now, if you're running 3, I did not just tell you to go from 3 to 20. Remember what I told you is to go 10% per week improvement. That's how you would get upwards of 20, right? So you don't just jump to 20. That's also a problem. And then over 20, regardless of how you're stair-stepping it there, also causes an issue. And so, it's best to periodize your training. And that's the other thing we do is you take, like if you're running 18 miles a week now and you want to increase it, you want to do some kind of running competition, then you can go upwards of like 30, but only brief periods of time, and you stair-step it up there over a period, and you have back-off weeks. You should never just going more exercise. This is really a bad plan. You have to go forward just like you do in any other area of life and then back off. Go forward and then back off. And so the most you should be increasing your exercise at a time in terms of weeks is like 3 weeks. And if you are a physical specimen and you've been in elite condition since you're a child, then you can push it 5 to 6 weeks of progression at a time. But otherwise, most people are around 3 weeks where they should increase the amount of exercise or load or anything about their exercise before they should really have a back off week. That doesn't mean they do nothing. And that doesn't mean they sit on the couch all week. That just means they back off by about 40% of what they've been used to.
Interesting. Oh, man. I think a lot of people need to hear that. That's probably news to a lot of folks. Yeah, that's well said. gives people a lot to think about, because I think everybody's thinking, well, how am I doing it now? Am I doing too much? Am I doing not enough? Like, what are my goals? And I think that's for a lot of people, like identifying what it is that you're after, right? Like, what do you want, man? Like, what improvements do you want to make? Do you want to lose fat and increase muscle mass? Do you want to look better naked? Do you want to increase your mobility so you can enjoy yoga better? Do you love mountain biking? For folks who have really specific goals, do you work with specificity on like a runner who who has running goals, or somebody that wants something simple as like just being able to get out of bed in the morning without being sore? Do you customize their plan specific to the goals that they have?
Yeah, we do exactly that. And we actually have a physiologist, a doctorate level physiologist who's also a university professor on our team. And when we have specific goals, like performance goals, clients, our physiologist actually customizes. So we have one part of our team that looks at the mechanical aspect, and if someone's looking for really high level stuff, and then we have our physiologist create the specificity to their exact goals, and where they what's called periodize. So they periodize all their training, they build up their overloads, and then have the undulation or back off weeks. And yeah, that's exactly, we do exactly that stuff.
That's cool. You call those back off weeks undulation?
Yeah, undulation. Yeah, and undulation is, so you have progressive overload and then you have an undulation week. Yeah, you got to undulate your exercise as well as progress your. Part of getting amazing results is actually timing, is using good placement with your undulations. And sometimes, like people that are really pushing it, sometimes, especially business people, maybe they travel. Maybe they travel for business, so now it's so easy just to bring your exercise down 40%, because now you just spend half the time in the gym and a lot lighter load and focus on your business stuff, or maybe you go on vacation. So, those things can also create kind of an undulation as well. But yeah, you've got to undulate. That's a huge part of exercise, is not just going more and more and more. See, the thing is most people think that exercise builds the body. That's the way they think. That's the way that most people behave about exercise, is they think exercise builds the body. Exercise does not build your body. It absolutely does. It is a stimulus that causes breakdown to your body. You break down your body exercising. It is a fatiguing, cell-destroying, oxidative process that causes stress to your body. So you better put the right amount of dosage, just like taking a drug. You don't want to overdose. Why? And then what does build you up? Sleep builds you up. Proper eating builds you up. Your body comes back and regenerates from the degeneration that exercise causes, and that's where you recover, is in the regeneration. So if you become amazing at regenerating your body, especially the older you get, the more fit, the more functional, the more healthy, the better you're going to feel. If all you do is cause degeneration through exercise, you will eventually feel like a degenerate. You're going to feel completely broken down. So it's not about the breakdown; it's about the recovery.
That's a really great reminder. Everything goes back to sleep. Eventually, we're talking about neuroplasticity or focus or productivity. Everything always goes back to sleep. Are you recovering effectively? How well are you letting your body rest, recuperate, build muscle? Lean muscle mass is built while you're sleeping. So by God, get your sleep. When it comes to injuries, and I know this is everybody has a different thing they're working on. What sort of like rehabilitation approaches are you a fan of? You've mentioned like band work on a fastener. I know it's like, well, it depends on what it is, Sean. I'm not, I know that, but are there?
Yeah.
Well, actually, let me change the question. Let me ask a different question. We're gonna do, this is totally improvised, but we're gonna do sort of rapid fire. I'm gonna ask you for about a couple of different techniques for rehabilitation. You tell me whether you're a fan of those or not. So, do you like the Theraguns, the vibrating Theraguns? Are you a fan of those?
When used properly at the end of exercise, yes.
Okay. Are you a fan of foam rolling?
When used properly at the end of exercise.
Okay. Okay. I can see where this is going to go. Okay. I think
Oh my God, you're good. You can ask more. It might not always be my answer.
okay. What about, static stretching, after exercise?
Yes.
Okay.
Now you filled in the other part for me.
Okay. All right. Um, um, what about like rolling the bottom of your foot with like a lacrosse ball or one of those like roller balls?
Yep. It's awesome.
Okay.
That can even be a good method actually before exercise if not done to excess. In other words, a minimal amount depending on the individual.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a sore spot for me. I had a broken foot that I was rehabbing. I got exosomes, stem cell injections, and to recuperate some of the soft tissue. And I went a little too hard on the roller on the bottom of my right foot, and it was like I'd re-injured it, and it was like fucked up for like a week. Just after I was just sitting there at a friend's house, just sitting there, just rolling my foot around. I just went too hard on it. I was putting too much pressure.
How many weeks did you do that after you broke your foot, correct?
The break was a long time ago, years ago, and then the exosomes and stem cells were done a couple of years ago. But it still bugs me, this right foot break, because there's scar tissue and stuff like that. And I went for a run with my buddy because he's into running now. I hate running. I can't stand running. But I went for a run with him, and I was like, oh, my feet are a little sore. And he's like, here, take this, like roll this thing out. And I did it with both feet, and I just went too hard on my right foot, and it basically like inflamed it for like a week and a half.
Yeah, I mean that's the perfect example tying back to what we were talking about before. Right. Remember the 10% overload? So that applies to everything. That applies to your foam rolling, that applies to your strength training, that applies to your aerobic conditioning. Yeah, something like rolling your foot with a ball, you can go a little more than 10%. So maybe you're used to 0, right? Or I don't know, rubbing in your shoe, or like, right, you got to think about what level of stimulus is your body used to that's similar to what you're doing. And let's say you come up with, well, probably not more than 90 seconds. Okay, so you probably shouldn't do it maximum more than about 2 minutes if we really stretch it. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that it's relative. That's exactly what people do and don't realize it. Like, just because that's, what I always say is, just because you can doesn't mean you should. So like, just because you can roll your foot that long, you can do it, doesn't mean you should. Just because you can go to the gym and do 20 sets of exercise, but you're only really used to 5 sets of it, doesn't mean you should. Just because you can bench 300 pounds, but you're only used to doing 185, doesn't mean you should. Just because you're used to, 3 miles of exercise, just because you can run 20 miles, doesn't mean you should, because you may only be used to 5. Like, honestly, like, for me, that's breakthrough knowledge. Like, if I give you over 20 years of wisdom about exercise, remember, just because you can doesn't mean you should. That'll help you so much. So, yeah.
No, I like it. Regarding your system, I want to make sure that we covered enough of it. We didn't really dive into the algorithm too much, but I am curious about it. What based on your unique system, what question did I not ask that you think would be really useful for people to know?
You started to allude to it. One thing that could be mentioned is you started to talk about like therapeutic recovery modalities and like recovering from injury and how best to come back. And like, I think you were starting to try to get in the direction of like how to make your body feel better when they have these type of issues, right? Somewhere in the realm of that.
Yeah.
And one great method, as long as you don't have any clotting issues, right? So you don't have any clotting issues, you don't have any blood clotting issues, you don't have high blood pressure, you don't have any other cardiovascular risks, then this method could be for you after you check with your doctor, okay? And that's using a method called BFR. So that's blood flow restriction.
Yeah.
a method that's been, it's actually an old method that's been heavily researched again over the last 10 to 15 years. It started at Mississippi University by Jeremy Lowenecki. He's really the modern day pioneer of that. But anyway, BFR training is basically a partial occlusion of blood flow to the working muscles. This is typically applied with some kind of armband or elastic device, and there's many different types. The best ones are ones that you can actually measure the amount of just like a blood pressure cuff, the amount of pressure that's being applied. Go ahead.
Yeah, we've had Jim Stray Gunderson on from Be Strong Training
Awesome.
and done episode. I'm a huge fan. I use that like 2 or 3 times a week. I'll do it like when I'm just kind of walking around, or I'll do it in conjunction with lighter reps for the X3 bar. And I've actually have another episode with him recorded because there was some new research that came out. But yeah, so you're a big fan of it.
Awesome. Yeah. BFR is awesome, and it can be used in many. It can be used all the way from the therapeutic modality into the muscle gain modality. So like after an injury, if you're not really in the mode of doing physical activity, you can simply just apply the BFR and do no motion. There's actually results from that, and just partially occluding the area and then keeping it on for like 15 minutes and taking it off. And then there's research to show using very low weight. There's also research to show that if you do that and try to do your normal regular workout and lift heavy, you're probably going to overtrain. So
yeah,
just like everything else, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Listen to Robbie, everybody. Just because you can doesn't mean you should, you stinker. I think us type A's need to hear that over and over and over and over. And I think it applies to being a workaholic. I think it applies to being a workoutaholic. I think it applies to obsessing over YouTube videos. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I think that's a great rule of thumb, guiding principle in life too. Well, this has been such an eye-opening. I really appreciate the approach, Robbie, because especially in Western culture, especially in the United States, there's this go, crush it, #hustle mentality that it's screwing a lot of people over. And as we age, as we get older, it's more and more likely that we can become injured and then just set ourselves way far back. And your approach sounds totally unique. And I've done a fair bit of research on it. The testimonials are insane. I mean, you have so many people that are like, this is the thing. This is what you should be doing. This is how it helped me. Here's where I was before. Here's what it did. And now here's where I am now. Can you tell us before I ask the final question, can you tell people where they can find you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Besides your cell phone.
Yeah, the best place to find me is one of 3 places, right? You pick your most beneficial point. But one is to find me at my podcast, and that's theultimateyoupodcast.com. And again, that's theultimateyoupodcast.com, which very interestingly, and Sean's been on our show, and my co-host is an 80-year-old gentleman who is a total physical specimen, not because he's a genetic freak, because he's absolutely not. Number 1, because he has the right mindset, and number 2, because he's used our system for over 20 years. And so he does things like slalom water ski at 80 years old, and he does things like tie his 100,000-pound houseboat to the beach and climb like these rocky mountains and anchor down the 100,000-pound houseboat by himself during rough waters at Lake Powell. Like, he does this at 80 years, and it's because of it's so cool, and he happens to be a professional Hall of Fame speaker, and he's my co-host. So a really interesting podcast, theultimateyoupodcast.com. Next, great place to find would be at thefitnessdoctor.com. We talk about our specific mechanical optimization system there. And then lastly, if you have a specific need, you really want to get in touch, you'd like to do some of our elite level services, you can literally text me directly, and that's 602-434-4248, or you can give me a call directly.
Awesome. Love it. Yeah, I will speak to the dynamic between you and Joel on the Ultimate You podcast is so cool. It's such a, I didn't realize he was 80. Maybe it came up when I was on the show, but to have that much energy and enthusiasm and presence, forget impressive at 80. It's impressive at 30 to have that level of sharpness and energy and vibration. The guy, he's just super inspiring. Yeah, it's a cool podcast, and the dynamic between the two of you is great. Go check that out, and for those of you, keep an eye out for my episode when it comes out too. So cool. Yeah, I like what you guys are doing. I know it's gonna, and you've got great guests. Tell them about some of the guests that you've already had. Besides your favorite guest, which of course is me.
Yes, our favorite Sean, of course. Yes, sir. The other guests we've had, not as notable as Sean, are Dr. Oz's sleep doctor, Michael Bruce, which is a clinical psychologist. He's an amazing sleep expert. We've had James Nestor, which is the author of Breath and the new science of breathing through your nose and all the fabulous health benefits that you get from that. I know, Sean, you've had James on your podcast.
I've been trying. I haven't had him yet. I've been working on it. Yeah, you beat me to it.
I'll see if I can get
Hook me up, man.
Dr. Trent Nessler, who's basically a famous PT, one of the leading cutting edge experts, actually has his own course on BFR methodology and training. He's a doctor of biomechanics and doctorate of physical therapy. So he has some amazing stuff on BFR. And he's been a guest of ours. And our podcast is pretty new. We have some other episodes where Joel and I dive into stuff together. So
awesome. Yeah. Very cool. So this is the last question. This is a fill in the blank. This can be based on anything that you know, everything that you know. It doesn't have to be specific to biomechanical optimization or anything. It can just kind of be generally, but please fill in the blank. Everyone would benefit from knowing
that just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Absolutely. I'm gonna write that down on my whiteboard there behind me. Awesome. Well, Robbie Stahl, this has been such a pleasure. This is such a nice breath of fresh air. This is a classic OPP episode. We talked about fitness. We talked about the right way to work out, how you should think about increasing your load, what you should be looking out for, common ways that people sort of screw themselves. I really encourage everybody and anybody that's interested. Obviously, Robbie is a very likable guy, very accessible. He's made himself available to you. So this was great. I really enjoyed this. I'm excited to release this for everybody. So Robbie, thanks for joining me today on the Optimal Performance Podcast.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, Sean. Greatly appreciate you.
And scene.